Kangchenjunga is the third highest mountain in the world. It rises with an elevation of 8,586 am in a section of the Himalayas called Kangchenjunga Himal that is limited in the west by the Tamur River and in the east by the Teesta River. The Kangchenjunga Himal is located in eastern Nepal and Sikkim, India. Kangchenjunga is the highest peak in India, and the easternmost of the peaks higher than 8,000 am. It is called Five Treasures of Snow after its 5 high peaks, and has always been worshipped by the people of Darjeeling and Sikkim. The main peak of Kangchenjunga is the second highest mountain in Nepal after Mount Everest. 3 of the 5 peaks are main, central and south are on the border between North Sikkim and Nepal. 2 peaks are in Tamur district, Nepal. Until 1852, Kangchenjunga was assumed to be the highest mountain in the world, but calculations based on various readings and measurements made by the Great Trigonometric Survey of India in 1849 came to the conclusion that Mount Everest, known as Peak 15 at the time, was the highest. Allowing for further verification of all calculations, it was officially announced in 1856 that Kangchenjunga is the third highest mountain. Kangchenjunga was first climbed on May 25, 1955 by Joe Brown and George Band, who were part of a British expedition. They stopped short of the summit as per the promise given to the Maharaja of Sikkim that the top of the mountain would remain inviolate. Every climber or climbing group that has reached a summit has followed this tradition. Other members of this expedition included John Angelo Jackson and Tom Mackinnon. Names: Kangchenjunga is the official spelling adopted by Douglas Freshfield, A.M. Kellers, and the Royal Geographical Society that gives the best indication of the Tibetan pronunciation. The brothers Herman, Adolf and Robert Schlagintuit explained the local name Kangchenjunga meaning oi the 5 treasures of the high snow as originating from the Tibetan word gangs meaning snow, ice. Chen meaning great. Mdzod meaning treasure. Lnga meaning 5. The treasures represent the 5 repositories of God, which are gold, silver, gems, grain, and holy books. There are a number of alternative spellings which include Kangchenjunga paragraph Nga, Kangchenjunga, 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 Kangchenjunga or Kangchenjunga. The final word on the use of the name Kangchenjunga came from His Highness Sir Tashi Namgyal, the Maharaja or Chojul of Sikkim, who stated that although Junga had no meaning in Tibetan, it really ought to have been Zod Nga Kangchen to convey the meaning correctly. Following consultations with a Lieutenant Colonel J. L. Awir, British agent to Sikkim, he agreed that it was best to leave it as Kangchenjunga, and thus the name remained so by acceptance and common usage. Kangchenjunga's name in Nepali is a currency, a yen, a currency, Shah, a currency, a currency, unregistered trademark, a yen, a currency, a Kangchenjunga. Its name in the Limbu language and the Kamburi language is Suolungma, meaning mountain to which we offer greetings. Suolungma is considered sacred by adherents of the Kurant religion. Protected areas: the Kangchenjunga landscape is a complex of 3 distinct ecoregions: the eastern Himalayan broadleaved and coniferous forests, the eastern Himalayan alpine meadows and the Tridor savannas and grasslands. The Kangchenjunga transboundary landscape is shared by Bhutan, China, India and Nepal, and comprises 14 protected areas with a total of 6,032 km2, Kangchenjunga Conservation Area located in Nepal. Kangchenjunga Biosphere Reserve, Bazi Rhododendron Sanctuary, Phambonglo Wildlife Sanctuary, Kyongnula Alpine Sanctuary, Mainam Wildlife Sanctuary, Shingba Rhododendron Sanctuary, Pangalorkha Wildlife Sanctuary located in Sikkim. Jorpio Khri Wildlife Sanctuary, Singalila National Park, Sinkal Wildlife Sanctuary, Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary, Neora Valley National Park located in Darjeeling. Torsa Strict Nature Reserve located in Bhutan. These protected areas are habitats for many globally significant plant species such as rhododendrons and orchids and many endangered flagship species such as snow leopard, Asiatic black bear, red panda, Himalayan musk deer, blood pheasant and chestnut-breasted partridge. Geography. The Kangchenjunga Himal section of the Himalayas lies both in Nepal and Sikkim, and encompasses 16 peaks over 7,000 am. In the north, It is limited by the Loniq-Chu, Goma-Chu and Zhongsang La, and in the east by the Teesta River. The western limit runs from the Zhongsang La down the Gingsang and Kangchenjunga glaciers and the rivers of Unsa and Tamur. Kangchenjunga rises about 20 km south of the general alignment of the Great Himalayan Range, about 125 km east-southeast of Mount Everest as the crow flies. South of the southern face of Kangchenjunga runs the 3,500 am high Singalila Ridge that separates Sikkim from Nepal and North Bengal. Kangchenjunga and its satellite peaks form a huge mountain massif. The massif's 5 highest peaks are listed in the following table. 4 glaciers radiate from the peak, pointing roughly to the northeast, southeast, northwest and southwest. The Zamu Glacier in the northeast and the Tailung Glacier in the southeast drain to the Teesta River, thereby forming a part of the Brahmaputra catchment. The summit of Kangchenjunga is the highest point of the Brahmaputra basin. The Yalang Glacier in the southwest and the Kankan Glacier in the northwest drain to the Arun and Kosi rivers, thereby forming a part of the Ganges catchment. The summit of Kangchenjunga, therefore, also forms a part of the Ganges basin. The glaciers spread over the area above approximately 5,000 am, and the glacialized area covers 314 km2 in total. The main ridge of the massif runs from north-northeast to south-southwest and forms a watershed to several rivers. Together with ridges running roughly from east to west, they form a giant cross. These ridges contain a host of peaks between 6,000 and 8,000 am. On the east ridge is Sinyolju. The west ridge culminates in the Janu, with its imposing north face. To the south are Kabru North, Kabru South, and Rathal. The north ridge, after passing through the Kangchenjunga North, includes the Twins and Tent Peak, and runs up to the Tibetan border by the Zhongsang La, a 6,120 am high pass. Climbing history. Early reconnaissances and attempts. Between April 1848 and February 1849, Joseph Dalton Hooker explored parts of northern Sikkim and eastern Nepal, mainly to collect plants and study the distribution of Himalayan flora. He was based in Darjeeling, and made repeated excursions in the river valleys and into the foothills of Kangchenjunga up to an altitude of 15,620 ft. In spring 1855, the German explorer Hermann Schlegelntweit traveled to Darjeeling but was not allowed to proceed further north due to the Nepalese-Tibetan War. In May, he explored the Singalila Ridge up to the peak of Tunglo for a meteorological survey. In 1879, Sarat Chandra Das and Lama Ujian Gyatso crossed into Tibet west of Oe Kangchenjunga via eastern Nepal and the Tashilhunpu Monastery en route to Lhasa. They returned along the same route in 1881. In 1883, a party of William Woodman Graham together with 2 Swiss mountaineers climbed in the area of Kangchenjunga. They were the first who ascended Kabru within 30 40 ft below the summit. They crossed the Kangla Pass, and climbed a peak of nearly 19,000 ft from which they examined Janu. They concluded it was too late in the year for an attempt and returned once again to Darjeeling. Between October 1885 and January 1885, Rinzin Namgyal surveyed the unexplored north and west sides of Kangchenjunga. He was the first native surveyor to map the circuit of Kangchenjunga and provided sketches of each side of the peak and the adjoining valleys. He also defined the frontiers of Nepal, Tibet and Sikkim in this area. In 1899, British mountaineer Douglas Freshfield set out with his party comprising the Italian photographer Vittorio Sella. They were the first mountaineers to examine the lower and upper ramparts, and the great western face of Kangchenjunga, rising from the Kangchenjunga Glacier. In 1905, a party headed by Alistair Crowley was the first attempt at climbing the mountain. Alistair Crowley had been part of the team attempting the 1902 ascent of K2. The team reached an estimated altitude of 6,500 am on the southwest side of the mountain before turning back. The exact height reached is somewhat unclear. Crowley stated that on August 31, "We were certainly over 21,000 ft and possibly over 22,000 ft, when the team was forced to retreat to Camp 5 by the risk of avalanche." On September 1, they evidently went further. Some members of the team, Raymond, Passion Salama, got over the bad patch that had forced them to return to Camp 5 the day before, and progressed out of sight and hearing before returning to Crowley and the men with packs, who could not cross the dangerous section unassisted with their burdens. It is not clear how far Raymond, Passion Salama had ascended but in summarizing, Crowley ventured we had reached a height of approximately 25,000 aft attempting a mutinous late in the day descent from Camp 5 to Camp 4, climber Alexis Pash, and 3 local porters, were killed in an avalanche. Despite the insistence of one of the men that the demon of Kangchenjunga was propitiated with a sacrifice, Crowley decided enough was enough and that it was inappropriate to continue. In 1907, 2 Norwegians set about climbing Jongari via the Kabru Glacier to the south, an approach apparently rejected by Grahama unregistered trademark S Party. Progress was very slow, partly because of problems with supplies and porters, and presumably also lack of fitness and acclimatization. However, from a high camp at about 22,600 ft they were eventually able to reach a point 50 or 60 ft below the summit before they were turned back by strong winds. In 1929, the German Paul Bauer led an expedition team that reached 7,400 am on the northeast spur before being turned back by a 5-day storm. In May 1929, the American E.F. Farmer left Darjeeling with native porters, crossed the Kangla into Nepal and climbed up towards the Tailong Saddle. When his porters refused to go any further, he climbed alone further upwards through drifting mists but did not return. In 1930, Garwan Quarter Entilla de Renfert led an international expedition comprising the German Uli Wieland, Austrian Erwin Schneider and Englishman Frank Smythe who attempted to climb Kangchenjunga. They failed due to poor weather and snow conditions. In 1931, Paul Bauer led a second German expedition team who attempted the northeast spur before being turned back by bad weather, illnesses, and deaths. The team retreated after climbing only a little higher than the 1929 attempt. In 1954, John Kempe led a party comprising J. W. Tucker, S. Jackson, G. C. Lewis, T. H. Braham and medical officer Dr. D. S. Matthews. They explored the upper Yaleng Glacier with the intention to discover a practicable route to the great ice shelf that runs across the southwest face of Kangchenjunga. This reconnaissance led to the route used by a successful 1955 expedition. First ascent. In 1955, Joe Brown and George Brand made the first ascent on May 25, followed by Norman Hardy and Tony Streether on May 26. The full team also included John Clegg, Charles Evans, John Angelo Jackson, Neil Mather, and Tom McKinnon. The ascent proved that Aleister Crowley's 1905 route was viable. The route starts on the Yaleng Glacier to the southwest of a peak, and climbs the Yaleng face, which is 3,000 meters high. The main feature of this face is the Great Shelf, a large sloping plateau at around 7,500 meters, covered by a hanging glacier. The route is almost entirely on snow, glacier, and one icefall. The summit ridge itself can involve a small amount of travel on rock. The first ascent expedition made 6 camps above their base camp, 2 below the shelf, 2 on it, and 2 above it. They started on April 18, and everyone was back to base camp by May 28. Other notable ascents. 1973 climbers Yutaka Agita and Takio Matsuda of the Japanese expedition summited Kangchenjunga west by climbing the SW Ridge. 1977 The second ascent of Kangchenjunga, by an Indian Army team led by Colonel Narinder Kumar. They completed the northeast spur, the difficult ridge that defeated German expeditions in 1929 and 1931. 1978 Polish teams made the first successful ascents of the summits Kangchenjunga South and Kangchenjunga Central, 1979 the third ascent, on May 16, and the first without oxygen, by Doug Scott, Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker establishing a new route on the North Ridge. 1983 Pierre Began made the first solo ascent. It was accomplished without the use of supplemental oxygen. 1986 On January 11, Krzysztof Wielicki and Jerzy Kukuczka, Polish climbers, made the first winter ascent. 1988 First successful American expedition. Led by Carlos Bula, from the north face. Summiting Wabula, Peter Harbula and Martin Zabalta, 1989. A Soviet expedition successfully traversed all 4 summits of Kangchenjunga that are higher than 8,000 m. 2 separate teams traversed the summits in opposite directions. 1989 American expedition led by Lou Whitaker, with 6 people summiting on the North Wall: George Dunn, Craig Van Hoy, Ed Viestos, Phil Ushler, Larry Nielsen, Greg Wilson. 1991 Slovenian Marija Franta and Jas Rosman attempted the first ascent by a woman. Their bodies were later found below the summit head wall. 1991 Slovenian Andrej Stromfeld and Marko Prezelj completed an alpine-style climb up the south ridge of Kangchenjunga to the south summit. 1992 Carlos Carsolio made the only summit that year. It was in a solo climb without supplementary oxygen. 1992 Wanda Rutkiewicz, the first woman in the world to ascend and descend K2 and a world-renowned Polish climber, died after she insisted on waiting for an incoming storm to pass, which she did not survive. 1995 Banaua registered trademark T. Chema, Pierre Royer and their Sherpa guide disappeared on October 6 near the summit. 1998 Jeanette Harrison became the first woman to reach the summit. Until then Kangchenjunga was the only 8,000er that had not seen a female ascent. 2005 Alan Hinks, a British climber, was the only person to summit in the 50th anniversary of the first ascent year. 2006 Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner, an Austrian mountaineer, was the second woman to reach the summit. 2009 John Gangdal and Matthias Carlsen reached the summit, becoming, respectively, the first Norwegian and the first Swedish mountaineer to summit this mountain. 2009 Idun Pasaban, a Spanish mountaineer, reached the summit, becoming the first woman to summit 12 8,000ers. In May 2009, Kinga Baranowska was the first Polish woman to reach the summit of Kangchenjunga. 2011 Tunc Findic became the first Turkish man to reach the peak of Kangchenjunga, his 7th 8,000er, with Swiss partner Guntis Brands via the British 1955 Southwest Face route. 2011 Indian mountaineers Basanta Singh Roy and Debasish Biswas of Mountaineers Association of Krishnanagar, MAK, West Bengal, India, successfully scaled Kangchenjunga, Maine on May 20, 2011. In May 2013 5 climbers including Hungarians Zoltirace and Copyright to Kiss reached the summit, but disappeared during the descent. Despite improved climbing gear, the fatality rate of climbers attempting to summit Kangchenjunga is high. Since the 1990s, more than 20% of people died while climbing Kangchenjunga's main peak. Tourism. Some of the most famous views of Kangchenjunga are from the hill station of Darjeeling and Antudadaivilam, Nepal. The Darjeeling War Memorial is among the most visited places from which Kangchenjunga is observed. On a clear day it presents an image not so much of a mountain but of a white wall hanging from the sky. The people of Sikkim revere Kangchenjunga as a sacred mountain. Permission to climb the mountain from the Indian side is rarely given. Due to its remote location in Nepal and the difficulty involved in accessing it from India, the Kangchenjunga region is not much explored by trekkers. It has, therefore, retained much of its pristine beauty. In Sikkim too, trekking into the Kangchenjunga region has just recently been permitted. The Goecha La Trek is gaining popularity amongst tourists. It goes to the Goecha La Pass, located right in front of the huge southeast face of Kangchenjunga. Another trek to Green Lake Basin has recently been opened for trekking. This trek goes to the northeast side of Kangchenjunga along the famous Amu Glacier. In myth, the area around Kangchenjunga is said to be home to the Kangchenjunga demon, a type of yeti or rakshasa. A British geological expedition in 1925 spotted a bipedal creature which they asked the locals about, who referred to it as the Kangchenjunga demon. For generations, there have been legends recounted by the inhabitants of the areas surrounding Mount Kangchenjunga, both in Sikkim and in Nepal, that there is a valley of immortality hidden on its slopes. These stories are well known to both the original inhabitants of the area, the Lepcha people, and those of the Tibetan Buddhist cultural tradition. In Tibetan, this valley is known as Byal Demo Shong. In 1962 a Tibetan Lama by the name of Tulshuk Lingpa led over 300 followers into the high snow slopes of Kangchenjunga to open the way unregistered trademark to Demo Shong. In literature. In the Swallows and Amazons series of books by Arthur Ransom, a high mountain is given the name Kangchenjunga by the children when they climb it in 1931. In the Epic of Mount Everest, first published in 1926, Sir Francis Young Husband, for natural beauty Darjeeling is surely unsurpassed in the world. From all countries travellers come there to see the famous view of Kangchenjunga, 28,150 feet in height, and only 40 miles distant. Darjeeling itself is 7,000 feet above sea level and is set in a forest of oaks, magnolia, rhododendrons, laurels and sycamores. And through these forests the observer looks down the steep mountainsides to the Ranjit River only 1,000 feet above sea level, and then up and up through tier after tier of forest-clad ranges, each bathed in a haze of deeper and deeper purple, till the line of snow is reached. And then still up to the summit of Kangchenjunga, now so pure and ethereal we can scarcely believe it is part of the solid earth on which we stand. And so high it seems part of the very sky itself. In 1999, official James Bond author Raymond Benson published High Time to Kill. In this story, a microdot containing a secret formula for aviation technology is stolen by a society called the Union. During their escape, their plane crashes on the slopes of Kangchenjunga and James Bond becomes part of a climbing expedition in order to retrieve the formula. The Inheritance of Loss by Kiran Desai, which won the 2006 Man Booker Prize, is set partly in Kalimpong, a hill station situated near Kangchenjunga. See also, Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education, further reading. Joseph Dalton Hooker 1855. Himalayan Journals. Assistant Director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. Major Lawrence Waddell 1899. Among the Himalayas. Travels in Sikkim. Book includes the exploration of the south of Kangchenjunga. Alistair Crowley 1905. The Confessions of Alistair Crowley, chapters 51, 52 and 53, tells of the Kangchenjunga expedition by he and Dr. Jacot Guillemot. Douglas Freshfield 1903. Round Kangchenjunga a narrative of mountain travel and exploration. Edward Arnold, London, Paul Bauer 1937. Himalayan Campaign. Blackwell is the story of Bora unregistered trademark S2 attempts in 1929 and 1931, republished as Kangchenjunga Challenge. Paul Bauer The German Attack on Kangchenjunga, The Himalayan Journal, 1930 Vol. 2. Lt. Colonel H. W. Tobin Exploration and Climbing in the Sikkim Himalaya The Himalayan Journal, April 1930 Vol. 2. Provides the early exploration and climbing attempts on Kangchenjunga. F. S. Smythe The Kangchenjunga Adventure, 1930–1931. Victor Gollancz, Limited. Smythe was the team member responsible for writing and sending the dispatches to the statesman in Calcutta who transmitted the dispatches to the Times, during the expedition of 1930 example. Professor G. O. de Renforth The International Himalayan Expedition, 1930, The Himalayan Journal, April 1931, Vol. 3. Details their attempt on Kangchenjunga. H. W. Tilghman The Ascent of Nanda Devi, June 7, 1937, Cambridge University Press. Relates the story of their intention to climb Kangchenjunga. Irving, R.L.G. 1940. 10 Great Mountains. London, J. M. Dent and Sons, John Angelo Jackson 1955. More Than Mountains book containing data on the 1954 Kangchenjunga reconnaissance. Jackson was also a team member of the first ascent of Kangchenjunga in 1955, also relates the Daily Mail Abominable Snowman, or Yeti expedition, when the first trek from Everest to Kangchenjunga was accomplished. 1. Relevant pages 97 onwards with 2 detailed maps. Charles Evans Kangchenjunga The Untrodden Peak, Hodder and Staunton, leader of the 1955 expedition. Principal of the University College of North Wales, Bangor. Foreword by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, KG, Joe Brown, The Hard Years, tells his version of the first ascent of Kangchenjunga in 1955. Colonel Narinder Kumar 1978. Kangchenjunga, First Ascent from the Northeast Spur. Vision Books. Includes the second ever ascent of Kangchenjunga and the first from the Northeast Spur on the Indian side of the mountain. See also Himalayan Journal Volume 36 and 50th Anniversary Edition, Peter Boardman 1982. Sacred Summits, A Climber's Year. Includes the 1979 ascent of Kangchenjunga with Joe Tasker and Doug Scott. Also in the Himalayan Journal Vol 36. John Angelo Jackson 2005. Adventure Travels in the Himalaya. Indus Publishing. Recounts in more detail the first ascent of Kangchenjunga. Simon Pius 2005. Kangchenjunga, Imaging a Himalayan Mountain. University of Wales, School of Art Press, ISBN 978-1-899095-22-3. An anthology of word and image published to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the first ascents of Kangchenjunga. Well illustrated with reproductions of paintings, prints and photographs describing the climbing history and cultural significance of the mountain. Preface by George Band. The above Himalayan Journal references were all also reproduced in the 50th anniversary of the first ascent of Kangchenjunga. The Himalayan Club, Kolkata Section 2005. Pema and Mita Zulka Kangchenjunga, Sacred Summit. The book details the stories and legends celebrated by the communities living in the Kangchenjunga's shadow, goes over the exploits of the early explorers and mountaineers. Chapters cover what Kangchenjunga means to Buddhism, mapping, early explorers, Alexander Keller's, early expeditions, the first ascent in 1955, the Indian Army ascent, the second British ascent, women climbers, the tiger climbers, the Yeti, and more. Profusely illustrated with many period photos. The Geographer at High Altitudes, Climbing on the Himalaya and Other Mountain Ranges, by J. Norman Colley, FRS Edinburgh, David Douglas 1902. The Glaciers of Kangchenjunga Douglas Freshfield The Geographical Journal, Volume 19, No. 4 April, 1902, ppA 453 472, Round Kangchenjunga. A Narrative of Mountain Travel and Exploration, Douglas W. Freshfield Bulletin of the American Geographical Society, Volume 36, No. 2 1904, C. K. Howard Berry 1922. The Mount Everest Expedition. The Geographical Journal 59, 81 99. General Bruce's illness a serious handicap. The Times, World Copyright, Lieutenant R. F. Norton, April 19, 1924. Expedition in the Kangchenjunga area. Account of a photographic expedition to the southern glaciers of Kangchenjunga in the Sikkim Himalaya, N. A. Tombasi, The Geographical Journal, Volume 67, No. 1 January, 1926, ppA 74 76, An Adventure to Kangchenjunga, Hugh Boosted, The Geographical Journal, Volume 69, No. 4, ppA 344 350, The Times Literary Supplement, Thursday 11 December 1930. The Kangchenjunga Adventure, F. S. Smythe. Im Kamp vom den Himalaya, Paul Bauer. The Kangchenjunga Adventure, F. S. Smythe, Himalaya, Unser Expedition, Geo de Renfurth. 1930, The Times Literary Supplement, Thursday 9 April 1931. Kangchenjunga, Paul Bauer. The Imperial Gazetteer of India. Vol. XXVI, The Geographical Journal, Volume 79, No. 1 January, 1932, ppA 53 56, Recent Heroes of Modern Adventure, T. C. Bridges. H. Hessel Tildman, The Geographical Journal, Volume 81, No. 6 June, 1933, PA 568, Paul Bauer 1931. Den Kanch, Der Deutsche Anruf auf den Kangchenjunga Paragraphen Gar, The Geographical Journal, Volume 81, No. 4 April, 1933, ppA 362 363, Paul Bauer. Sumner Austin 1938. Himalayan Campaign, The German Attack on Kangchenjunga, The Geographical Journal, Volume 91, No. 5, 478, Charles Evans. George Brand 1956. Kangchenjunga Climbed. The Geographical Journal 122, 1 12. Charles Evans 1956. Kangchenjunga, The Untrodden Peak. The Times Literary Supplement. Lou Whitaker, Memoirs of a Mountain Guide, 1994, references. External links, Kangchenjunga page on Himalaya-info.org, Kangchenjunga page on summitpost.org, Alistair Crowley's detailed account of the 1905 attempt on Kangchenjunga, Kangchenjunga history for a more detailed up-to-date account of the mountain's history and descents. Kangchenjunga, India Nepal on Peak Bagger, Kangchenjunga on Peakware Photos, Glacier Research Image Project presents photos tracking 24 years of changes in glaciers at Kangchenjunga.